Alright people, today I'm going to be covering the 3 Destiny 2 armor attributes in depth and my surprising findings while testing them. This video was a complete and total journey. Originally, I set out to gather data, figure out how strong the 3 main attributes were, make up a super dope clickbaity title like a boss, and then post it for tons of YouTube glory and money and fame and all that jazz. That didn't really go so well. Before getting into the results though, I want to discuss what exactly I tested and why I did so, and why I think the findings matter a whole lot. On all notable armor in Destiny 2, there are 3 main attributes: mobility, resilience, and recovery. Additionally, armor mods placed into that gear, among other things, can increase these 3 attributes much further. Mobility should increase your Guardian's maximum jump height and movement speed. Resilience is listed as increasing the amount of damage a Guardian can take before dying, and recovery increases the speed at which you regain lost health. All of these sound useful, right? Well, I want to know just how much each of these 3 attributes affected your Guardian, and generally how good they really were. Plus, I didn't really see an analysis like this yet, so I figured, why not, right? Super tank Guardian with tons of resilience? All mobility speedster? Let's do it. For mobility, the experiment was pretty simple. I grabbed a few pieces of alternative gear to raise and lower it for separate runs, and gave myself a specific distance to run. I chose the church in Trossland just for easy access, and started with my foot right at the line behind these food cans, and I tried to get the start and stop frames as close as possible, so bear with me. It was pretty simple since I only needed 2 runs to compare, one with less mobility, one with more. Simple, right? My first run had 4 mobility. I initiated a sprint, and went across the church to the opposite door, cutting the timer as soon as the pillars were past my field of view, going frame by frame for as much accuracy as possible. The time was 5.713 seconds. That was test number 1, which I would compare to the next result. For test number 2, it was also very simple. I increased my mobility from 4 to 7 with some alternative pieces of gear and did the exact same thing. The frame by frame timer on this one hit 5.756 seconds. So let's compare. 5.713 with 4 mobility for test number 1 compared to 5.756 with 7 mobility for test number 2. That's an increase of 0.043 seconds to get from start to finish, when my Guardian is supposed to be moving faster, so the time is supposed to decrease. It seems like mobility did the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. Now, this does not take into consideration various other bonuses, such as the transversive steps or the Mida multi-tool, and there's a lot of other mechanics in the game that can augment movement speed. It purely examines the effect of raw mobility on your base move speed, and the end result is that even if there is a difference at all, it is minuscule. So small, in fact, that this main attribute is pretty much worthless in its entirety to prioritize, and you should not be going for this on your armor or your mods. Now, there are a lot of different human error components to this. Maybe I was late with a frame, maybe my starting position was a hairline behind or in front of my previous one. And I did run this test and a couple other tests multiple times, but these are the findings that I had, and I would encourage everyone out there to do your own testing and draw your own conclusions. There's a lot of different ways you can test this. I did not even test jump speed, but purely based on mobility versus sprint speed, it did not work at all and it was worthless. Next up was resilience, but the test for this one was not quite as simple, mainly because we don't have any health or shield number indicators in Destiny at all. I decided the easiest way was to stack up resilience to different values and let a predictable, isolated enemy damage me, then calculate how much of my health was gone and how many hits from it I could survive. For this purpose, I chose Shanks in Trossland. Easy to isolate, low damage, predictable. I did my first run with 1 resilience, basically figuring with no armor raising it and no mods augmenting it either, I would take quite a bit of damage to help me show its effect. Also, for consistency, I put in a ton of work acquiring gear that was the exact same power level to swap out, so that my power would not fluctuate as I adjusted my resilience, which would have polluted the test. Once I had taken 1 hit of damage from this shank, I went into Photoshop and graphed it out. It turned out that with 1 resilience in total, basically the weakest I could possibly be, I could survive 26.5 shots from the shank before dying. That was the baseline. I then upped my resilience to 5 while not changing my light level, found another shank in Trossland to make sure it was not a harder enemy, and did the exact same thing. And this is where I started to get a little bit freaked out. After taking 1 hit and graphing the damage out, again, same as before, I found that with 5 resilience now, 5 times the resilience, I was able to survive only 21.25 hits. Now, this is no easy thing to test. There are so many factors at work here that I don't think I could ever be 100% confident that my test is 100% accurate. Perhaps optimal range affected the Shank's blast. I was indeed closer to Shank 2 than Shank 1, but I was pretty close to both, so that shouldn't be it. There could be hidden strength values associated with different enemy types for every single one, but that's unlikely. It's possible, but it's unlikely. Or there could be a bunch of other things that I don't even know that polluted this test to some degree or another. But the main takeaway is resilience does not do hardly a thing. As it stands, I took more damage after raising my resilience, which is absurd and makes the stat a lying death trap. But even if by some combination of factors, this discrepancy was caused and that's not how it's supposed to function, and in reality it does decrease damage taken, again, it would be so minuscule that there is zero value whatsoever in speccing your character into resistance or towards resistance with their armor and your mods. Last up, we had recovery, and I had really, really low expectations. Honestly, I'm thinking to myself, seriously? These stats are garbage. They do nothing. If they do anything at all, it's so hidden and tiny that why would I ever even care about it? But I was too deep in now to turn back, so had to keep trucking forward. The experiment was another simple one, but there were actually two things I wanted to test, not just one. I set up with 5 recovery as a base, and I made sure that yet again my gear would keep my power level consistent. I know that ideally I should have started with 1 and then done 9 of all 3 attributes, but I worked with what I had, and it's not easy to get gear that has that, so I did my best. I decided that using enemies for this one would not work, so I found a nice secluded spot to huck MLG nades at myself, because if enemies were shooting me, it would be way too unreliable. I threw the nade and started the timer frame by frame exactly when I took damage, and I found that after 5.93 seconds, my shield recovery initially began, and a bit later, at 7.312 seconds, I was back at full health. Part 1, check. I swapped out some gear, stayed at the same light level, decreased my resilience a tiny bit, but who cares because it's trash, and increased my recovery up to 9. Now for round 2. I hit myself with the same nade and started the timer. This time around, my shield began to rapidly regenerate at 4.589 seconds and was finished by 5.756. Finally, something valuable. It turns out that an increase from 5 to 9 recovery gave me more than a 20% increase in both shield recovery speed and start time, which is a really big deal, and gave me all the clickbait I could possibly need to take it to YouTube. To summarize, mobility and resilience are utterly worthless, but recovery is phenomenal. Wherever possible, taking recovery in gear mod slots or using items that have it as a high base roll on their stat bar intrinsically is a big boost to your Guardian survivability. Higher recovery means you can dip in and out of cover when damaged and recharge much, much faster than your peers or even the enemies. And that can mean the difference between smooth gameplay in which the player feels empowered or slow, tedious encounters where you always have to hide and regen. While I'm happy that one stat is at least of definitive value, and I'm super glad that I did this test and kind of experimented with it, and hopefully other people find some value from it too, I'm very sad that 2 out of the 3 main attributes, which are some of the very few customization options that we even have in the game at all, are simply not worth getting. It's really disappointing, and it cuts down on the diversity and the things that you can do. But at least now, I know, and hopefully a lot of other people know, take as much recovery as you can. It's going to help in the raid. It's going to help in the Nightfalls. It's going to help everywhere in the game to give you a better experience. And that's going to be it. I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. If you want to support, there is a ton of links down below. The Twitch live stream, if you want to tune into that sometime, the Upper Echelon forums at upperechelon.gg, the Amazon affiliate link, and a link to our newest sub-clan, our subdivision of our larger clan, since they fill up to only 100 members very quickly for anyone interested. I will soon be organizing raid schedules and events through those forums, so sign up if you have any interest, and as always, guys, have a nice night.